Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Stranger Than Fiction News. This is Ron Johnson broadcasting from the dark side of the planet. I'm joined by a very special guest today, Miss Madison Star Moon. How are you doing today, Madison?
Hi, Ron. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to have an activist, a fellow activist online.
Right.
And, you're a hard-working girl. Most people have seen your work out there. I've used some of it myself.
I appreciate that.
Big fan of your activism, especially the fact that you're calling up the local media and things of that nature, trying to find out what's going on with these chemtrails. And we've found out quite a bit of information that way. Believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, they call these chemtrails mobile pollution, and that they are not regulated by current laws. There's nothing that anyone can do about this pollution, about these chemtrails, about this fallout, this toxic fallout that is spraying your local community. Tell us about some of your more interesting adventures with the local media. Have you gotten anything? Have you gotten through to a meteorologist?
Oh, yeah.
What do they tell you?
I mean, I've spoken with many different meteorologists, news personalities, media in general, mainstream media, and they all sing the same tune. They all say that chemtrails are contrails, water vapor. Then they go on to debunk any other theory that we may possibly have for what we're seeing in the sky. And of course, they do no atmospheric testing. The meteorologists do no atmospheric testing, no chemical testing. They don't test the emissions that are coming out of the airplanes. When you call the feds, the government, to try to complain about the aircraft activity over your neighborhood, they basically tell you, without even identifying the planes that you're speaking about. They do no investigation. They don't even take a report. This is where it starts to get scary. When you can't make a police report of a criminal activity in progress, even a suspected, criminal activity. I called the sheriff's office. Nothing. The Attorney General, the White House. I spoke with Obama's personal secretary, who told me that she would personally give him the message that I've, contacted the EPA, that I've been doing this for 5 years, I need help. And no one will contact you back, and they're all covering it up. Now, you have to ask yourself, how can so many people be involved in the cover-up of this secret clandestine spraying operation? I'm still trying to figure that out myself. How can so many people be compromised?
That's a very good question. It sounds like they're throwing out canned responses when you call them up. Oh, well, it's just a contrail. And it's kind of funny because depending on who you talk to, even in the conversations that you've had with these people, sometimes they'll say it's pollution. Sometimes they'll just call it a contrail. But generally, it seems like the definition of a contrail has expanded to include airplane pollution. I've seen this more than once on various articles from the mainstream media where they're basically like showing you a chemtrail-filled sky, and they call it contrails. And with that definition, they'll say, well, because of the pollution, it's causing all of this stuff. And so, there is this progression. They are coming kind of full circle in admitting the situation a little bit. I've seen them even say it's unintentional geoengineering in the mainstream media. But it is pretty concerning when you call them up and you want to file a complaint and they basically say, well, we're not going to do that.
Right. There's no agency that's accountable or responsible. And you're right. When you opened it up and you were saying that mobile sources of air emissions are not governed, that is 100% fact. There is no agency that is regulating air emissions. They have to come from a stationary source, like an industrial plant, for them to even look at it. So that in itself is suspicious. And what about the Clean Air Act? The Clean Air Act, airplanes were written out of it. It literally mandates or, regulates every single type of emission you can imagine except for airplanes. Don't you find that convenient?
Yeah, well, that's generally how they do their business. I mean, they called the Clean Water Act, but in fact it allowed fracking companies to dump as much stuff as they wanted to in the environment. They called the Patriot Act, the Patriot Act, but it wasn't to protect patriots; it was to go after patriots.
Yeah.
And that's basically their MO. They will call something one thing and do the exact opposite. So I'm not surprised that this mobile pollution isn't governed by the Clean Air Act. But we should be asking, why aren't, elected officials or bureaucrats more concerned about this type of pollution?
Because I don't think you can even get elected as an official if you are an environmentalist or if you go against the grain. That's what I think. I think you have to be a puppet to get into that position in the first place. You're just pushing an agenda of your corporate, overlords or whoever is running this thing. I have no idea who is spraying chemtrails on us, but if you look at the grand scheme of things, it does fit in with Agenda 21, Monsanto creating their aluminum-resistant seeds. I mean, you can break it down who can benefit from chemtrails, but who is actually the people up there, if they are people, it could be drones, but that are spraying us. Who would agree to spray themselves, their own families? I mean, it's not like the spray picks and chooses who it's going to affect. Unless, of course, they put something in it that only affect a certain type of person.
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, from other activists, we've been able to discover that they mix up what they're spraying. They mix it up a little bit. So sometimes they're spraying lithium. Sometimes they're spraying aluminum. Sometimes they're spraying barium. But it seems like, heavy metals are basically a common denominator in this mixture.
Yeah.
We've seen various patents out there that talk about sulfates and talk about silicon as well. So you don't know what they're spraying. And they've got this plausible deniability because they're not willing to go up there and investigate what they're spraying. And even if you bring them lab results with ChemSnow or chemtrails, they'll basically tell you, well, there's no way to know for sure that it came from the chemtrails. It might be from your local pollution factory or your local super dump site. So we have no idea where all of these contaminants are coming from, and people just continue to treat the world like an open sewer. So there's really no way to be absolutely sure. But obviously, what we're looking at isn't normal. Clouds don't normally look like ropes.
Right. Well,
so
they call the clouds now contrails cirrus, which is stating that it's clouds that come from planes. Well, they just make up words for whatever these new chemical concoctions are that we see in the sky that some people think are clouds. I mean, clouds in itself are pollution. So, it's pollution clouds of chemicals because we've chemically altered the environment. Okay? Chembos, chem clouds, coagulation of the formations of the clouds. We never saw any of that before. And so what they do is NASA and all the other agencies, they just make up fake names for these cloud concoctions, put them into some type of thing that, like the Cloud Appreciation Society. That's a great example of disinformation about what we're seeing in the sky. The Cloud Appreciation Society posts pictures of chemical concoctions sprayed out by airplanes and then puts names to it to make it sound scientific and believable. And then the sleeping sheep are like, oh, we have 1,000 new clouds we never had before. When I grew up, there were like 4 clouds, and we learned about them in science, Why are there 10,000 cloud formations now? Because they're adding so many different particles, nanoparticles, which is a dangerous particle in itself because of the size. These things are damaging, toxic things that they're adding to the environment that we have no idea what it's going to do to us in the long run.
Well, the least we can say is that whatever these cloud formations are, they're synthetic. They're not natural. It doesn't take a super brain to figure that part out. Now, the question that we should be asking ourselves is, why are they chemtrailing like there's no tomorrow? And you touched on the depopulation idea, which is quite possible given, what they're doing with the food and with the water and with everything else these days. It seems like they're lacing everything with poison. So nobody would be surprised if this turns out to be an Agenda 21 depopulation type of program. However, there are other theories that I just kind of want to throw out there, such as the SRM theory, which is solar radiation management. And so, we have noticed that these chemtrails do disperse into synthetic clouds, and one of the effects seems to be to raise the albedo or to increase the reflection of the light back into outside of our atmosphere. And so, it is a possibility. And given the intensity of the spraying, it seems like they're dealing with a rather dramatic problem. And as far as why aren't people talking about it, you know, more than likely they either don't know that it's been mixed in with the jet fuel, or if they do know, they've been told not to say anything about it.
Right.
And so,
for solar radiation management, first of all, chemtrails cause global warming. I know you guys remember in the 80s when they told us not to use hairspray, aerosol hairspray, because it was destroying the ozone layer. Why now would it be safe to spray as much aerosols as we can as close to the ozone as possible? Okay, that's number one. Number two, if SRM really did work, and we are using chemtrails to mitigate global warming, like the disinformation peddlers want you to believe, it's killing everybody on the planet. Okay? So you cannot say that you're going to save the world, kill everybody on the planet, or even risk people on the planet. Even if you only killed 10,000 extra people, like, what's his name said? David Keith said on Stephen Colbert. That they're only going to kill like 10,000 extra people by spraying sulfuric acid, shrouding the atmosphere in sulfuric acid. He's saying that's a viable option to mitigate against global warming. But if you're going to say that solar radiation management is necessary, it is killing the inhabitants of Earth and its ecocide. So it's not working. Now, you are also saying that it's reflecting the sunlight back to space. That's another lie. It's not true. It is actually bringing heat, because what goes up must come down. So it's actually blanketing the Earth with tiny nano-sized aluminum particles which build up over time and actually draw heat from the sun into the Earth.
Well, you make some excellent points, and I'm not going to argue against them per se. What I would say, however, is that from some of the white papers that I've been able to read, they're basing their SRM techniques on what happens after a volcanic eruption, which is basically to kind of like block the incoming sunlight and to induce what they call global dimming. But on the other hand, we also know that during the winter, if it's a clear sky, it's colder, but if it's a cloudy sky, it's warmer. So there could be this warming effect associated with chemtrails, and certainly the fallout is going to have a side effect.
Yeah.
And for sure, the people that are doing this don't care what that side effect is.
Yeah, it's not okay with us for them to experiment on us. They do not have our consent. They have to have our consent to spray anything into the atmosphere.
Oh, they have the right. They have the right. There is a law that says that they can experiment.
No, there's not. Okay, they can write a million laws saying it's okay. Without our consent, that law is not worth a piece of paper it's written on.
Well, did they ask you your consent when they started feeding the people GMOs? Did they ask your consent when they started putting
right?
That's
why I say that.
It would be nice to get consent.
It's not. No. It's actually the law. It's that's an unlawful act. So it is a criminal act.
Truly, it is. It should be a criminal act. But unfortunately, it's not a criminal act because our country is run by criminals, and they're paid off by people with special interests. So whether or not it's the right thing, I don't think is really the question here. They don't care, and they have an agenda in mind. And this really relates to everything else that we talk about, and that's like the good versus evil thing. This really fits into their MO, global dimming, chemtrailing and poisoning the planet, killing off the population. So nobody should be really surprised. And all you're going to get from them is deflection, deception, and denial.
Right.
You're always going to get lies. I mean, they practice lies in the open, and they like laughing in your face about it. And so, nobody should be surprised about what the official story is regarding these chemtrails. But what we need to do is continue to raise awareness. Because we're seeing progress. Even the mainstream media is starting to have to defend this, in the open more by calling this unintended geoengineering, or even including the term pollution when they say contrail. So we're having an effect. We need to continue on, and you're doing a wonderful job by calling, meteorologists and recording that and putting that online, and hopefully that'll inspire other people to do the same sort of thing. Then go to city council meetings. And continue on. But certainly calling the media up and doing what you're doing is excellent. They must be cowering in fear every time they see your number light up on their...
No, now they're just doing what the EPA does. The EPA has me blacklisted, which is a crime, considering they never addressed my 5 years of formally filed complaints.
Let's talk a little bit about your activism as far as these death towers are concerned, these cell phone towers.
Right.
You've been doing this for quite a while, going up to them and recording them, and even putting some groovy music along with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it is rather strange when you start peeling away the layers and looking at the power supply and how these things are set up. Basically, sometimes they're like one right next to the other, and that certainly doesn't make sense when your basic headset has a range of about 20 miles. So there's obviously something to it. What have you discovered during your activism uh, with these towers? I mean, have you gotten any information from the local phone companies or anything?
Now I've gotten information from a Death Tower whistleblower, and you can find those videos on YouTube. It's called Interview with a Death Tower Whistleblower. I have part 1 and part 2, and I've also done my own, on-scene investigation. Many of the addresses of these towers are not even the actual addresses. They say that they do that to protect the, privacy of the tower. That's not true. They do it to lie, and so they can cover up the fact that they put these towers in the most vulnerable places that you could think of. For example, I'll just do a couple of them. In my neighborhood alone, I have 7 death towers right across the street from my house at the military base, Nexrad and a HARP station. Okay, I've got 3 death towers in the park next to my house, right over top of the basketball court, next to the playground. The towers are just everywhere here in Virginia Beach. Anyone that lives here knows it. You see them on almost every corner. There's 2, 3, 4. They also have what we call death tower farms, I guess, antenna farms, and that's where you have a huge clump of them. You can have up to 7 to 15 of them all in one place, military related. I live in a huge military town. But the point of these towers is, who knows what they're for? When we call the companies, we can't get any information. They say it's all proprietary. When you get the numbers off of the towers and you call the tower companies, they tell you that their tower operator equipment and the people that lease the tower is all anonymous. We can't find out any information. The only real way to get any information is to get a FOIA request per antenna, per tower, which is pretty much impossible. So, I mean, unless you've got tons of money, because it costs a lot of money. Freedom of Information Act is expensive.
Yeah, and I think you basically get the idea as far as what kind of answer you're going to get if you call in about these towers. Basically, we don't know, we can't tell you. There's nothing you can do anyways. They're not going to tear them down for your benefit. And if anything, they're going to keep putting more up in your area. And so the only real solution here is to kind of plan ahead the best you can and live outside of the big cities, because that's where you're exposed the most by far.
Yeah, but we can't let them push us out of our towns. We can't let them do that, because then they win. That's when people tell me to move to get away from the chemtrails. Where am I going to move from? Earth? Maybe I need to move to Mars or something. They don't chemtrail there, but seriously, you cannot escape this agenda. The agenda is out to get you.
Yeah, well, in an ideal world, you wouldn't have to do such a thing, but that's not, the reality of the situation. The reality of the situation is that this is part of an agenda. It's part of a plan. It's a grid extermination system, contingency of last resort. And so it's kind of like all of a sudden you weaved into oncoming traffic. What you going to do? Well, you better get out of the way. You don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. And, if it was an ideal world, if we were truly living in a democracy, we would have a say, but we don't live in a democracy. We live in a republic, and right now, the politicians that are in charge of everything are basically bought and paid for by this very beast system that is trying to enslave us. And they're doing a fine job at that, because they already own the most modern technology. They own the food supply, they own the power supply, they own the jobs, they own everything. So right now, basically, it's wake-up time, because they're going to be rolling out an automated workforce. They're going to be rolling out Terminators. They're going to look to put in place an Elysium-type society. We covered just a couple days ago on how a very reputable website was forecasting a huge population decline in North America. And these are people that are in the know. And so, Deagle.com. And so the point is that it looks like everything is set up for, massive extermination. And it's just a few years out. And right now we're talking about the Rio Olympics, but by the time the 2020 Olympics rolls around, it's going to be game over. So this is the time to stand up and protest. This is the time to be active and start and go out and reach people if you haven't done that already, and try to raise awareness and try to organize with people that are in your area. So if the shit does go down, you have people that you can get in touch with and work with, because that's going to matter. If you're all alone with Terminators rolling around and people turning into cannibals, what chance do you have, even if you bunker in like it's 28 days later or whatever?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, we got a lot of work to do, but these are like, really good issues and sensitive issues right now because they're difficult to hide. You can't tell necessarily by the food you're eating if it's a GMO or not. You can't really tell with the water you're drinking if it's fluoridated or leaded or not. But you can certainly tell when there's chemtrails in the sky, and you can certainly tell when you got a death tower right across the street pointing at you. All you got to do is pull out a meter or a camera. And so these are good topics to touch on with people that, seem to be, not awake yet. And I guess that's a different topic of discussion about what to do about these sheeple. But, this is definitely a good topic to be pushing out there in the mainstream as much as possible. And so, call your local TV station, go out to your local city council meeting, write your state representatives, get on the forums, on Reddit, on Facebook, whatever, Twitter, be active. Go out there and reach out to 100 people a day, 1,000 people a day, 10,000 people a day. Keep going.
Wow.
We're making progress.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it's a pretty big wake-up call to step outside of the country and not see a police state as it is back home. And that's one of the things that, we just don't even think about anymore. We don't even think about how they changed everything since 9/11. And we don't even really think about the Orwellian state that we're in anymore. And it's bad enough for us because we still have that taste of liberty, of freedom from the 90s and stuff. But the people that are, stepping out of high school today, they never knew the free world. They never knew the pre-9/11 world. They've only known TSA and Homeland Security and long.
I want to say something about the TSA. When I was going through the TSA in America, not in Canada, Canadian customs, they were very friendly and nice. But the American customs people, first of all, they felt me up, they x-rayed me twice, and they stole half my stuff. So that is a bona fide guaranteed fact. And I asked them, why did you take all my stuff? And they're like, you can't take that on the plane with you. Of course, I haven't flown in a while, and I didn't know what the new laws were, but I was shocked at what I had to go through. I felt so embarrassed having to take off my shoes and my coat and have this lady feel me up in front of everybody. It was disgusting.
Yeah, that's part of the fun now. And I think it's on purpose. They want to kind of get you dirty before you get on the flight and everything. Seriously, yeah, they'll pat you down. Yeah, they'll x-ray you, they'll radiate you.
Yeah, it was so messed up.
You're having some GMO snacks,
Right? Yep, and they were GMO snacks. I read the label when I was on the plane, yep.
Of course they were.
Yeah, and so I took 6 flights, and so I had to get x-rayed many times, and it was just annoying, and really, that does violate. It violates the cells of your body, when you think about what they're doing. I mean, first of all, okay, this is just my opinion. I should state it like it's just my opinion. But no terrorist took over aircraft with box cutters. Okay? So if we're still waiting to find these terrorists with box cutters through the TSA x-ray machine, it's not going to happen. That was a concocted story.
Absolutely.
Get it through your head, people.
Absolutely. And I think, the first thing that we should be pointing out to people who are still sleeping is Building 7. Explain to us Building 7. Compare Building 7 to the
Can I explain it? Building. Can I explain Building 7, please? I want to play devil's advocate for a minute because I get tired of debating this. This is what I'm told, that Building 7 was knocked down from the massive, vibration and whatever of the World Trade Center going down. That's what I'm always told.
Yeah, and that's the official story. But then you just have to point out what happened in Oklahoma City. That Murrah building was gutted, and it stood for weeks. And I think the most damning evidence probably is the BBC footage. They couldn't get their time zones right, and I think that's happened to everybody who's dealing with international news. And, and they started broadcasting the information 20 minutes before it went down. Oh, yeah, the building just went down, third building just went up as well. And you could see it right behind the lady. And then all of a sudden they cut out. And that's been played like probably 100 million times.
Yeah.
And that's probably the most damning evidence that, in fact, everything had been pre-planned. And obviously, if they were announcing it that afternoon before it happened, it was a demolition. And in order for a demolition to take place, that takes planning as well.
Right.
So whatever happened that day, wasn't the official story. What happened that day was something a little more nefarious. And I think they left it a little obvious, to laugh in our faces, and so they can continue to laugh at our faces. And that's how powerless the population is right now. We're being held hostage in our very own country. And
by our own people. When I was watching those TSA agents, there was this poor old man in a wheelchair. Okay, this man could not walk. He couldn't even hold his head up. He was obviously like in his late 90s, okay? He goes through the x-ray thing or whatever, and this TSA agent pulls him aside and is all like bullying him around. I'm watching this man do it, and he's like, "Stay there," to the man. And I'm thinking, the man can't even lift up his head. Are you being serious right now? This is out of control. Like, this is how we're treating our elderly, while all these people just stand by and watch and are like, oh, it's the TSA. Don't cause any trouble or you will get on a no-fly zone. I mean, a no-fly thing,
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and it's becoming like the Gestapo, like a Stasi state, and they're trying to recruit more and more people. And it really is history repeating itself with modern-day technology. And so these false flags aren't a surprise, and I don't think that we need to really justify our frame of thought with the audience here. But for those that are looking to wake people up, Building 7 is definitely the first thing that you should be pointing out to people. It's as obvious as chemtrails. Bring up the BBC report, and and it just goes on and on. I mean, what's kind of funny, about the BBC report is that when they had their 9/11, which they called 7/7. They had a guy come on the very next day or the day of, and he was like, "Oh, we were preparing these exact same drills as it happened, and we had to go from theoretical to actual at a flip of a switch." And the guy, like on live television, is like, "So what you're telling me is that you were preparing, for this very thing, for this very scenario, as it happened." And it did happen. And the guy's like, yeah, right there on live BBC. So, I mean, it's just like, the MO is there over and over. And we saw the same thing in Boston.
Sandy Hook.
Sandy Hook. But Boston especially, I mean, they tweeted out, there's going to be an explosion right across from the library in an hour. And an hour happened, and there was an explosion. And this was like the Boston Globe that reported this as an exercise.
Right.
And we've seen this time and again, San Bernardino, there was an exercise.
Yeah.
There's always an exercise running in the background. And 9/11 was no different. There were exercises on the other side of the country to pull away the air defense system, so to speak. But and they had like the FEMA people there the night before. They brought in all the FEMA people into New York on September 10th. And then they told a bunch of people that needed to know, don't be anywhere near the World Trade Center. And there's, I mean, the evidence is out there. We're dealing with tyranny. We're dealing with an occupation. And they're feeding us a bunch of bull. And I think like there's a good amount of people that know this, because during every election, there's about 100 million people or so that don't go out and vote. And so there's 100 million people out there that are thinking, okay, well, this is just a bunch of bull, and so we're just going to opt out. But that doesn't change a thing. And so, these 100 million people need to get in there and vote for a third-party candidate somehow, and put that person in the power. Because if all the if all the people that were abstaining from voting got together and voted for a citizen-led government, we might actually be able to make a difference.
Yeah, but I think it's already so rigged that it's too late. I believe all presidents here are selected. We only have the illusion of a democracy or a republic, whatever you want to refer to it as. We do not have a legitimate voting process here. I do not believe that.
It's the illusion of choice, like you said. It's a duopoly. And right now we're totally in occupation. I mean, the mainstream media has you believing that other countries are, tyrannical and this and that. Well, they took away our rights how many years ago? You don't have the right to vote for a real candidate anymore. You get a choice between two people that are selected, through a process that is basically bought and paid for. So you have no real voice in a system that's gone wild. And everything they're doing right now is basically to either trash the planet, kill children here and abroad, to enslave you in a system that's based on fiat money. And I mean, it's just a nightmare, man. We need to basically start at zero, almost, and rebuild as far as the democracy is concerned.
Yeah, I agree.
Because I mean, it's just out of hand. And I think it'd be different if we kind of went to school and they told us, well, basically democracy happens in other countries. It doesn't happen here. If everybody had gotten that form of education, I don't think there'd be so much to complain about.
Yeah, we were brought up with a false sense of security here.
Oh yeah, well, there's that, but they've told us, land of the free, home of the brave, and then on the other side they're like, well, you don't really have any rights.
Yeah.
If you want to protest, you can go into this little zone, and we'll put you on a list.
Yeah.
And we're gonna take away your guns.
If you're not on a list by now, you're not doing enough.
Right, exactly. So I mean, it's turned into basically a nightmare, and this is nothing compared to where it's going. The destination is all about direction and speed. And so, if you look at the direction we've been going since the 1950s, what direction are we going here? Well, we're going in the wrong direction. Murder rates are up, divorce rates are up, family values are down. Kids are raising themselves basically on the streets for the most part. And we're basically churning out militant atheist sociopaths, that are basically going to line up for the post-human society. It's not going to be a big deal for these people that are graduating high school to get a chip or the mark of the beast and then just kind of sell themselves off, and then eventually merge with the machines. They have no problem wiping out humanity with the post-human agenda. They're all going to be active participants. They're all going to line up like they're lining up for their iPhone. And so this really is the last chance we have to make a difference, because as soon as the next generations come around, they will vote everything that you hold near and dear out, and they'll be looking to wipe you out. And it'll be just like the Terminator scenarios, the Elysium scenarios, except in those movies they were forced to put in a happy ending so that people could sleep well at night. But all of those movies are based on serious research, and we're seeing that come to fruition.
Yeah, that's creepy.
It is creepy. In any case, I think we're going to close it here. I want to thank Madison for joining us today. I want to thank all of you listeners out there for tuning in. And is there anything you want to say in closing, Madison? Where people can find you and stuff?
Right. In closing, I would like to say, Ron Johnson, that I am a huge fan of all of your work. I love your videos, Stranger Than Fiction News. All of your work is second to none. And I just want to thank you on behalf of all of us for your hard work and effort in exposing this agenda to the public in a way that anyone can understand. You can find me on Madison Star Moon. You can find me on Blog Talk Radio. You can also find me on YouTube under Madison Star Moon. And currently I'm under Amanda Danielle on Facebook.
Excellent. Well, we'll be sure to include all that in the links, all those links in the description. Once again, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. This is Ron Johnson from Stranger Than Fiction News. And if you're listening to this, you are the resistance.